Welcome back to Beyond the Gates. Tonight's revelation will leave even the most loyal viewers breathless. What begins as a moment of forbidden desire erupts into one of the darkest nights Fairmont Crest has ever seen. Vanessa, the woman who built her life on control and reputation, walks in on a scene that shatters everything she believes she owns, Dani and Joey entangled in betrayal under the dim morning light. What happens next is not passion, not jealousy, but pure destruction. Blood, guilt, and rage collide in a storm that no one can escape. As thunder cracks outside, a single violent act inside the Dupree mansion sets off a chain reaction of lies, fear, and revenge that will change every life behind those gates. The question now is, when love turns to fury, how far will Vanessa go before she destroys everything, including herself? Vanessa didn't breathe, she only reacted. The sight before her, a betrayal made flesh in the half-light of morning, broke something inside that could never be mended. Dani's skin against Joey's, their whispers, their laughter, it all fused into one unbearable image that carved into her like glass. For a moment, everything froze. Then rage took form. It moved through her veins like fire, unthinking, merciless. The next thing she knew, her hand was on Dani's shoulder, shoving her down, the sound of shattering porcelain slicing through the silence. Blood bloomed across the floor in a crimson stain, and the room fell into chaos. Joey's scream barely registered as he dropped to his knees, cradling Dani's motionless body. Vanessa staggered back, trembling, her fingers slick with blood she didn't remember spilling. Outside, rain battered the windows, washing the night clean, except nothing would ever be clean again. The air was thick with the metallic scent of guilt. Vanessa's chest rose and fell, her heart punching against her ribs like a wild animal. She could still see Dani's eyes, open but fading, wide with shock rather than pain. The same eyes that once looked at her with admiration, almost devotion. How had it come to this? The one person she had mentored, defended, brought into the Dupree circle, now tangled in the arms of the man she'd once trusted most. It wasn't only jealousy, it was humiliation. It was betrayal woven into the very fabric of her identity. For Vanessa, control was everything. Dani and Joey had stolen that. And in stealing it, they'd unleashed the monster she tried so hard to bury. Rain crashed harder, drumming on the roof like a heartbeat. Vanessa's mind blurred, shifting between disbelief and clarity. Each drop outside seemed to whisper a question: was this revenge or self-destruction? She looked at Joey, his face white, his hands red, and saw the fracture of a man caught between love and horror. He tried to stop the bleeding, his voice shaking, but Vanessa only saw the movement of his hands, tender and desperate, the way he'd once touched her. A bitterness rose so sharp it made her gag. She wanted to scream, to undo everything, but the truth had already spilled like the blood between them. Somewhere deep inside, the logic that had guided Vanessa's rise began to resurface. She knew panic would destroy her faster than guilt. She needed control again. She needed a plan. She tore her gaze from the blood, focusing on the pieces that could still be salvaged. The room was a crime scene now, a testament to everything she had lost and everything she must now conceal. She glanced toward the rain-smeared window, where lightning flashed, revealing her reflection, pale, streaked with tears and fury, but still composed enough to calculate. She knew what she had to do. Not for forgiveness, not for love, but for survival. Dani's body trembled faintly, alive, perhaps barely. Vanessa felt the air shift. A single thought crossed her mind: what if she survived? What would Dani tell the world? What would Joey do when forced to choose between guilt and loyalty? The Dupree family could not withstand another scandal. Vanessa's empire, every deal, every alliance, every ounce of power she held, was built on precision and perception. One whisper, one photograph, and everything she had clawed for would vanish. Her thoughts spiraled back to Joey. He was shaking, his hands soaked in blood, muttering words she couldn't hear. Was he crying for Dani or cursing Vanessa? did it matter? In his eyes she saw both terror and blame. The same man who had once sworn he'd never betray her now knelt before her proof of infidelity. Maybe this was justice. Or maybe it was punishment, for her arrogance, her obsession with control, her refusal to believe anyone could hurt her. The lines between victim and villain blurred. For a brief second, Vanessa almost pitted herself. Then the pity hardened into something colder. The rain outside became a roar. Thunder cracked, shaking the house. Vanessa stumbled backward until her shoulder hit the wall, the shock of the impact snapping her mind into ruthless clarity. There was no undoing what had been done, but there was always a way to shape the narrative. She could call for help. She could lie. She could make Dani the aggressor, Joey the witness, herself the victim. It wouldn't be the first time she had rewritten reality. But for the first time, she wondered if she still had the strength to believe her own lies. In the hours that followed, the Dupree mansion became a graveyard of silence. The staff avoided the east wing, whispering of raised voices, broken glass, and something darker in the air. Joey disappeared before dawn, his car tires cutting through the mud and rain. Dani was found hours later, half conscious, her pulse weak but steady. The doctors said she would live. And that single fact shattered Vanessa more than the blood, more than the betrayal. Because survival meant consequence. Dani's memory might be fractured, but even a fragment could destroy Vanessa's name. By evening, the weight of what had happened began to sink in. Vanessa sat alone in her study, hands wrapped around a glass of untouched wine. The world outside continued without mercy, rain pounding, thunder fading into morning. Each sound was a reminder that time was moving forward, dragging her toward an inevitable reckoning. She replayed the moment again and again, the shock on Dani's face, the warmth of blood, the trembling in her own hands. It wasn't supposed to happen. None of it was. But deep down, she knew it had been building for years. Every secret, every manipulation, every compromise of conscience had led her here. This was the cost of power, one act too many, one betrayal too far. As the night deepened, the guilt transformed into something heavier. Fear. What if Joey talked? What if Dani remembered everything? What if Martin found out and turned the family's influence against her? The possibilities multiplied until they became unbearable. She rose abruptly, crossing the room, pacing like a caged animal. Her reflection followed her in the rain-streaked window, haunted, cornered, dangerous. There was no escaping the truth now. The only question left was how far she would go to bury it. In her mind, Vanessa began to assemble the pieces once more, the story she would tell, the evidence she would destroy, the people she could still manipulate. Yet beneath the cold strategy, something fractured beyond repair. For the first time in her life, she couldn't separate power from pain. She had always believed that control was her shield, but tonight it had become her weapon, and it had cut both ways. Outside, the rain softened into a mournful drizzle, the storm's fury spent. Vanessa pressed her blood-stained hands against the glass, watching the world blur. Somewhere in the distance, police sirens wailed faintly, swallowed by the night. She didn't move. She didn't run. She only whispered to herself, a silent vow, half confession, half curse. That no one would ever take everything from her again. Not Dani, not Joey, not the ghosts of her past. But as lightning flickered one last time across her face, it was clear that Vanessa was no longer the woman who had walked into that room. She had become something else entirely, a creature born of rage and regret, both victim and executioner. And though the rain had cleansed the ground outside, it could never wash the blood from her soul. Somewhere within the walls of Fairmont Crest, the truth waited, patient, merciless, and inevitable. And Vanessa knew when it finally surfaced, it wouldn't just destroy her. It would devour everything she had ever touched. As the storm faded into a gray morning, Fairmont Crest lay cloaked in uneasy silence. The echoes of shattered glass and rain-soaked cries had vanished, replaced by a stillness heavy with consequence. Vanessa stood at the edge of the corridor, her reflection flickering in the broken mirror, her hands trembling with the memory of blood. Outside, the air smelled of wet earth and guilt. Dani's life hung by a thread, Joey had vanished into the rain, and Vanessa was left to face the monster she had unleashed, not upon them, but within herself. Every beat of her heart felt like judgment, every breath a reminder that no lie could bury what had been done. The empire she once ruled with precision was cracking, and no amount of power or manipulation could piece it back together. Somewhere deep in her chest, rage and regret wrestled for dominance. She told herself it was an accident, that Dani had provoked her, that Joey's betrayal demanded consequence. But the reflection staring back at her whispered otherwise. This wasn't control, it was chaos, the kind born when pride collapses under its own weight. The rain began again, soft but relentless, seeping through the open window as if the heavens themselves refused to let her forget. For the first time in her life, Vanessa felt powerless. She had crossed a line that no storm could wash clean. And as dawn broke over the estate, she knew one truth beyond all doubt: nothing she built, nothing she destroyed, could ever silence what the night had awakened inside her.